now. Okay, so we're live now and we're recording. Flo, thank you for being on my podcast. You're very generous with your time.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me. No problem.
Great. Where are you in the world right now?
Right now, I am in Germany. I live here with my husband.
Ah, okay, cool. Also, you are in Germany right now. So I would love to talk about Germany as well later. So, Flo, can you tell us a little bit of your background so that the users will know a little bit about where you came from?
Sure. I am 33. I'm British. I lived solely in the UK until I was about 30, and then went to Barcelona for my MBA. And that was the first time for me living outside of the UK, which I loved. I really thought it was a fantastic experience, and then have stayed out of the UK since then, moving from Barcelona to Germany last August.
Oh, I didn't know that that was your first time living abroad. You are always traveling, and I think that it's really cool to live abroad. So, what are you doing right now? Can you tell us and what are you focusing on for work right now? What are you doing right now?
So I really want to be an entrepreneur and work for myself if possible, specifically because I have a range of ideas and I'm really curious to know whether they're any good, essentially. Some people, I think, want to work for themselves because they want to be in charge of their own diary or whatever it might be, or make lots of money. I'm certainly motivated by being in charge of my time, but my biggest motivator for trying to work for myself is, like I say, is the quality of or not of my ideas. I'm not emotionally attached to any of my ideas themselves, but I am, as I say, curious. So I'm working on one at the moment, which is unrelated to anything I've done previously, and it's an extremely niche interest of mine, which has an environmental impact back in the UK where I'm from. So it affects the sort of rural landscape in the countryside of where I'm from. So we're going to try and do that, and I've split my year into 3-month windows. So I have 3 months to test, to sort of a lean startup model, test a different business idea. And if at the end of 3 months it has hit certain metrics, then sure, it'll qualify for a bit longer. But in the case of this idea, for example, if by the end of June I haven't made the progress that I want to make, I haven't got an obvious go-to-market strategy, or I haven't built up some market already, then at the end of June I would consider it a failure, essentially, a good failure. I think failing is good, and I would move on to a different idea.
When we graduated from IESE, you had started already a startup called Close Club.
Correct.
Very popular, and I am a user of it and have used it so many times. Are you still doing that right now?
Yeah, so Close Club still exists, amazingly. Close Club, exactly. I set it up in Barcelona. It very much still exists in Barcelona. I didn't move it when we moved to Germany. I didn't move Close Club as well because it was a struggle setting up a new business in a city where, in the case of Barcelona, where Spanish was my second language, and I was okay at it, but not brilliant by any stretch. And I did not have the enthusiasm to do the same thing again in Germany. And I knew that I would be learning German from scratch. So I left Close Club in Barcelona. And for me to grow Close Club, either in Germany or in the UK, or even within Spain, I would need to put a lot more time and effort into it, which is why I put it, as I said earlier, put it back into that kind of basket of ideas. And if I get to it, I will dedicate, as I say, 3 months or so onto trying to push it to the next level. But at the moment, it still exists. It is as it was when you last saw it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, Close Club was a social commerce application where we basically can rent items from one another, right? And I saw that it has saved almost half a ton of CO2 emissions. What I wanted to know was that was climate your goal, or was it something completely different than that?
For me, there was two very simple goals for Clothes Club. The environmental impact of buying things that we only need temporarily, perhaps once or twice, was a key motivation. And that environmental impact, the environmental impact of any business is a key motivator of mine. And the second one was simply a frustration at the way in which our networks, our personal networks, are so underutilized. In my opinion, everyone is very good at utilizing their professional networks on LinkedIn, for example, or with podcasts or whatever it might be. But we're actually not very good. We're quite good at asking our friends, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Can we do the other? Or do you know anybody I can talk to about this? But we're not very good at saying to our friends, can I borrow this? Can I borrow that? Can I have the other?
That's so interesting, because when I would use Close Club, I was borrowing like a tape measurement, and I know that someone have it, but then I'm too shy to ask for a tape measurement, or I don't want to meet people to borrow my tape measurement, and that basically reduces the barrier, right, to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's extraordinary. People are shy, and sometimes they're genuinely shy about contacting other people and asking for something. And sometimes there's an added level of that they might not be shy with the individual themselves. It could be a friend of yours, but they don't want to put the pressure of, okay, we're friends, I'm going to ask you for something, and because we're friends, you feel socially obliged to lend it to me. So if you're going through a platform, even if you know you're going to ask for something and your close friend has it, sometimes it's easier to ask indirectly and give your friend the opportunity to say no without offending you. We see that particularly with some of the higher value items like cars, for example. You don't want to say, hey, Nikki, can I borrow your car? But if you saw that Chloe was looking for a car, I'm your best mate or very close by, I live on your street, you're not using your car, it's much easier for you to say, hey, I saw you're looking for a car, do you want to use mine?
Yeah, and you're really using technology and what it didn't exist 10 years ago to do that. I mean, you're right, you're using something brand new. You are using like a tool that didn't exist 20 years ago, which is our mobile phones and your software, whatever, to connect. That's a really like a innovation from at least from my point of view. What was the performance since you started this project? Like, what was the traction, or what was the performance like since you started?
You mean the performance of the business, or what do you mean precisely?
For the business, for a closed club, or however you measure
Well,
the performance of closed club.
I mean, the performance of Close Club in the first instance, when my co-founder Finn, we were both putting a lot of effort into it as part of our MBA. It was really satisfying because it would grow. It would grow month on month. The number of users was exceeding our expectations. I don't remember the numbers now, but I certainly know we had our expectations and we would often meet them or exceed them. And what we found interesting was the enormous range of items that people request. Everybody's second question usually after Closed Club is, what is Closed Club? How does it work? And second of all is, well, what do people ask for? That's our most common second question. But the answer is, it's almost impossible to say because the breadth is enormous. It's all the things you wouldn't think people ask for. That's what I would answer it. It could be, tape measures. It could be cooking pots. It could be bicycles. It could be cars. It could be barbecues. It wasn't even demarcated by size. By category, probably we would say that cooking and sports were the busiest. And I think in terms of the broader performance, once we took it to other universities outside of IESE, where we did the MBA, once we took it to other universities within Barcelona, that was more difficult because you'd get a lot of people following the Instagram page, interested. You'd go, and Finn and I would spend a lot of time face to face with customers, persuading them to follow, to sign up, to explaining how the system works. But actually the conversion rate of interest into actual user or follower into customer was very low, and that was disappointing. And it's those kinds of challenges that if I came back to the idea, if I do pick it up again, it's that specific area that I would focus on, is how do you get someone with whom you have no existing connection to be the first user, because to build trust on a network like that, you need to see your friends or your acquaintances using it.
Yes, yes. Would you have seen a profit out of this business, or do you think this was able to make a business that and you can sustain from it, or not?
I believe so, yes, because well, for a number of reasons. I think ultimately, if a need is great enough, there is almost always a willingness to pay for it. And a lot of the items that Clothes Club was exchanging, essentially there isn't a market that exists elsewhere for that for those goods. You can either buy a second hand, or you can buy first hand on Amazon. But if you want something temporarily with the ability to return it, there isn't competition there, particularly if you include the speed of just getting out of your house, walking down your street and picking it up from your neighbor. You can actually beat Amazon. So you have a convenience factor too. So when we looked at the reasons why people used Clothes Club, actually, I think there is a willingness to pay there. And in some of the circumstances that we tested it, people did pay. The challenge for us was the cost, ironically, of setting up a simple payment platform and enlarging the network, because people don't really want to charge their friends. So our business model would be to take a percentage, say 15%, of whatever the owner of the item earns out of lending that item to somebody else. So if you lend your camera for a weekend and you make 100 euros, we wanted to take 15% of that 100 euros. And the challenge is, if you lend it to your friend on your street, a lot of people don't actually even want to charge them 100 euros. But the minute they lend it to a friend of a friend, they do. Partly because they feel they can charge that person, and partly, I believe, because when you are exchanging money, it also adds a degree of certainty to the transaction. And I think people actually feel more comfortable paying somebody that they don't know directly for an item. Interestingly, the only item that was ever damaged or lost was actually lost. It was not damaged, it was lost. And it was lost on a second connection, i.e. somebody lent it to somebody they didn't know. And it was a different year group, and there was no money exchanging between the two. And I think the fact there was no money exchanged essentially almost confused our natural knowledge of trade. So I do think there is a willingness to pay. I do think paying is actually important, but I do think it is a factor of how big your network is. In order to charge people, you need to have a network that's larger than just your immediate friends. It needs to be first, second, third order connections, essentially, and then you're charging those people, or you're paying those people to borrow an item, and that's where we make our money. So it is unfortunately a factor of size. So it's kind of a price or income versus growth, chicken versus egg scenario.
That's so interesting. Like, second degree wants to get charged.
I believe so. Yeah, that was our experience. It may be proven wrong, but it's certainly our hypothesis. and it was proven correct on a couple of occasions. You'd need to do it at scale, obviously, to really be able to sit here and say, yes, that's definitely the case. But that's our hypothesis. The indications are that it's correct, but time will tell. If we come back to it, that would obviously be a key thing to test.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it becomes a not-for-profit, which isn't necessarily a problem. It still has an environmental benefit that we've talked about. There is probably a space for a not-for-profit clothes club in the world. And that's certainly something I have thought about. But I think in the first instance, I would love to make it profitable.
Yes. So Clothes Club was a great topic that I want to segue into your career. You were the COO of Foxtons. You were in a comfortable career, and you could also become the CEO of that company, but you took a big risk. What suggestion would you suggest to someone who is considering to start their own business from a high level position in a big company such as Foxtons?
Well, first of all, I was operations director, so I wasn't COO. I was operations director at Foxton. So I obviously had there was a big distinction. I was closer to the coal face of it. I mean, it's a sales company. Essentially, it's a real estate sales company. So I was closer to the coal face of selling than a COO would be. But I actually did also enjoy that. And I would have had to work my way up a bit further up the ladder if I was to make COO. But ultimately, you're right. The risk is the same. It was certainly similar because you are on one particular career path and you are making a dramatic change towards another. For me, I felt that I'd had 8 years experience in the real estate industry, in the sales industry, and I felt that those were A, transferable skills, and B, skills that I would never lose. So I felt like I had a very strong base, which I could always return to if I wanted to. But equally, I wanted to learn and see the world outside the one that I already knew, and I wanted to find different challenges. And really, it came down to, like I said at the start, I had a range of ideas. I did the MBA because I lacked the confidence prior to the MBA to actually put any of those ideas into practice myself. I felt that I was very good at, certainly, for example, sales, but I had very little broader business experience. So the MBA really helped fill in some of the gaps, even if it's only just in theory. Of course, you need to put these things into practice, but just having some of the theory that we learned during the MBA gave me the confidence to say, okay, right, now I have a bit of a bigger picture here. Now I can put some of these ideas to the sword and see if any of them are any good. And if they prove not to be, I have no shame in going back and getting what I would call a normal job, be that in real estate or directly in sales or real estate. We'll see. But my objective is what I'm doing now, which is really seeing whether my ideas are worth something or not.
Wow, that's nice. I'm happy to go into how also IESE helped me to become a little bit more analytical, and I'll save for that maybe one questions later. I wanted to know more on your background. Did you come from a family who start their own business, or something completely different than that?
Yeah, yes, I did, and I think that definitely helped, or I do come from that family. My father is Australian and moved to the UK in his very early 20s, and started during his lifetime and started a couple of businesses broadly from scratch, and that certainly had an influence on me. My mother has never started a business, but she is a freelance advisor in her particular area professionally. So she's, again, both of them really have been great role models of of individuals who have been able to follow their interests in life and align their businesses and their income with their interests, but they've also both had the confidence to pursue what they're good at, and I respect that. And in my father's case, his skill set is quite broad, so the businesses he set up were very different from each other. And that also gave me, I guess, coming back to your earlier question, the confidence to say, okay, right, well, I've been working in real estate for this long. Well, now I can try something like Clothes Club. It bears no relation to real estate, but the common denominator in both of them is sales. You're either selling yourself in a startup, essentially to investors or to customers, or you're selling physical bricks and mortars in a real estate company. But the difference between the two isn't so big after all. So I think once you establish your skill set and have the confidence in your skill set, you find that it's applicable to so many different things. And that's what I learned growing up, is work out what you're good at and then apply it in a number of different areas.
You seem like a person who's very self-aware, like you know what you can do, and you not only know that and you do that. I have to say that the ESA experience also taught me to be more aware of what I can and cannot do. For example, I was a very instinctual manager before going to ESA. I didn't use a lot of data, even if there was, because I thought it was too long. But then the projects at ESA just helped me to be mindful of, okay, we're all the same. People will act the same in any given circumstance within a reasonable boundary. So you should learn from people before you. And I learned, for example, the in a search fund class, because I'm doing search funds. There are some sectors which is good, some sectors which is not good. So that is like the rule, so to speak, and it will be easier to follow that rule. But of course, trailblazers, like other people, like yourself, you probably will look at other sectors that are new. So I think it's good to know what you're good at, and also good to know what you're not so good at, and if you can enhance that by going to school, or maybe start a new business, or latch onto your existing network like family and friends. You
Yeah,
um
I agree.
you you had a partner, and I have a partner right now in my project. And do you have a criteria for your partners when you first started your business, Close Club, or how did you approach partnering?
Well, how I approached partnering for Clothes Club is not necessarily how one would approach partnering for all business ideas. In the event of Clothes Club, I was very lucky. I worked with my co-founder Finn, and we had a great time. So I'm sure you're theoretically not supposed to choose your co-founders based on whether you have a shared sense of humor, or whether you have, I don't know, a shared, in our case, a shared history, because we're both British, which was random because actually the number of Brits on the course was very low. So that was a coincidence rather than anything else. But we did have a wonderful time together. We did get on incredibly well. And we do genuinely really enjoy each other's company. And we're still, even though Clothes Club isn't, I mean, it operates in Barcelona in a small way, but it's definitely not what it was. We're still great friends, and speak a lot. So in the case of Clothes Club, I chose a friend and someone I get on really well with, and someone whose company I enjoy. Whether that's the right thing to do, probably not. Having said that, we were both self-aware enough to know what our skills were or are, and certainly Finn does complement me in lots of ways. Probably not every way, but certainly enough ways. For example, I find maths and numbers incredibly difficult. I'm dyslexic, and I've always found anything to do with numbers or even Excel pretty challenging. Whereas Finn would probably describe himself as a yeah, I'd say he'd be a self-confessed geek, and he loves those kinds of numbers. He loves operations. He loves Excel, and so we had a really good division of labor in our or division of responsibility in the running of Clothes Club. In that, my background is sales. I love talking to people and going up to strangers and presenting. And Finn finds that more difficult, but he loves being in front of the computer, thrashing out the numbers and giving me the stats and the data to then go to the world with. So it worked, and it worked very well. But I think in terms of the selection process, it was more luck than design.
Yes, cannot forget luck, but you were very active in our Spanish class. You were very determined to get the sentence correct, I remember. And I was in one class with Finn, just a bit of background. He always asked the sharpest question, so no wonder like Close Club did so well. I think that partnership was positive and did really well. So that was really cool.
Yeah, we had a lot. Yeah, you're right there. I think we both definitely have questioning minds, and Finn might not describe himself as a salesperson, but he doesn't lack confidence at calling out a question or an injustice or whatever it might be if he sees one. So yeah, I think you noticed something right correctly there.
Nice. Well, let's plug our school for connecting us to partners, but also like just like yourself, trying new things. So what are you
Definitely.
doing? What are you doing right now, Chloe? What is? Can you spill more about what you're doing right now? Your projects or your what you're focused on right now?
Yes, I can. I warn you that it is extremely niche. But yes, I'm working on a hypothesis, on a project, essentially, which is whether or not commercially bred chickens, so chickens bred for meat or for their eggs, whether we can change their diet to make their diet more environmentally friendly. Because at the moment, commercially fed chickens in Wales, where I grew up, so a very small part of the UK, commercially fed chickens, their waste essentially is responsible for 80% of upland river pollution, which is a big number. So you have these beautiful hills and mountains of the rural countryside, and actually the rivers are a lot more polluted than people think because of what goes into them. And what goes into the rivers comes from the fields. It's upland areas, so it's not towns, it's not cities, it's fields and hedgerows and open land. And that is all agricultural waste. And your sheep or your cows, they eat grass, but your chickens eat corn. And that corn has been sprayed with a variety of fertilizers. And so when the chickens waste goes into the river, it's essentially the remains of the corn, everything they haven't used to grow or to lay an egg comes out of them as waste, and it takes with it or keeps with it the same fertilizers it had on it when it went into the chicken. The chicken just processes it, and as a result you have extreme levels of nitrogen and phosphates going into otherwise very natural rivers and causing a great deal of damage.
Interesting.
I told you it was niche and nothing to do with real estate or Clothes Club, but there is a connecting thread, which is obviously certainly to Clothes Club, which is the impact. And I think if you're going to put your time and effort into energy, in my case, I looked at the ideas that I have and I genuinely ranked them by impact. And if I could solve any of these, say there's 6 business ideas, assuming they're good ideas, they should all be solving a problem. Well, okay, let's rank those problems based on, in my case, impact, environmental impact. And so this one came out tops, which is why I'm working on it before I go back, if I go back to Clothes Club.
What did you say? You're gonna
I
go.
think it's the impact. If I could solve this problem that I'm working on right now about the environmental impact of chicken waste on rivers, if I could solve that problem, I believe in the short term it would have a greater impact on the environment than by going back to Clothes Club or re-energizing Clothes Club or taking Clothes Club to Germany or the UK. So for me to organize my time based on greatest impact, I have chosen to pursue this business idea over and above the Clothes Club right now.
And you save half a ton of CO2, and now you're trying to make the rivers cleaner, right? So you're motivating me to think about my rivers and also the CO2 in my city. But the target, and I want to be accountable, is for me to improve healthcare system. So I'm trying to use hospital systems to improve access to healthcare. So in 1 year's time, I hope that I'm increasing the level of healthcare quality in Indonesia. So I will be accountable to you as well.
Perfect. Okay, nice. Yeah. I think it's important to have your sort of central values or be clear on what's important to you. It helps for me it helps me focus my time. In the case we just talked about, I'm able to think, okay, right, well, where if this is the problem that I want to put my time and effort into, which in the case of me, which business idea should I focus on first? And I think in the end, probably something similar in your case. And then you can measure yourself against that and say, okay, well, in this amount of time, what kind of impact in numbers terms have I made? In Clothes Club, I know that I can make half a ton of impact. At the very bare minimum, I can save half a ton of CO2 in a relatively short period of time. Can I do that after, say, 3 months of working on my rivers idea, or not? It's great to have some kind of scale by which to measure your performance.
I agree, Chloe. Sometimes I feel guilty because of my privilege of going into an European education and having family with entrepreneurial background. But then I realized that I can be too emotional sometimes. So I just see that if I'm moving the needle, or at least planning to, I'm not a entirely unproductive MBA student. So I'm actually putting some impact in my society. So yeah, that's luckily the technology these days that we have. We see TikToks of of um of a project in Bali that cleans plastic from the rivers. Wow, this is so cool! I want to do this. And plastic is a big problem, and
Yeah.
entrepreneurs from all around the world are coming to Bali just to clean the river, which is like weird. You want to go to Bali just for holidays, so that's really cool. So, Chloe, we're nearing the end of this podcast.
Okay.
If people want to ask for your advice, can they contact you? And if so, how can they contact you?
Of course I can. Yeah. So the easiest way to contact me would be on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn
Cool.
is the easiest place to find me. The downside of LinkedIn is that you need to be able to spell my first name, which is not so easy. But if they can spell my first name, which is Clodagh, and then the rest is easy. So yeah, that would be the best way of contacting me.
Great. I want to highlight the name again is Clodagh space Blain.
Yeah.
Great. Chloe, this was such a fun podcast. I learned a ton from you. Thank you for coming to my podcast, inspiring me.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Nikki. Take care and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Chloe. Have a great
Okay.
day. Have a great day.
Goodbye.
See you. Bye bye.